Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Brothers, sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals, I'm going to go through a few articles today, spaced down through the years to show what opinions people have had of me and the work I did in the legislature. And it'll give an idea of some of the things that I've done, because people don't pay much attention to activities in the legislature while it's in session. And frankly, it can be kind of boring, kind of repetitious, so I understand. But this article is from 1983, and I'm using it to show the kind of issues that I was dealing with all the time. Now, that's 41 years ago. Bill to equalize pension benefits for men, women, goes to Governor Carey. This is what I did, the only black man there, and all of these white men, and the vast majority of women affected by this problem were white. But sometimes it takes a black man to do that which ought to be done. Gender could no longer be a factor in figuring pension benefits for state and county workers under two measures given final legislative approval Wednesday and sent to Governor Bob Carey. Legislative Bill 210 and 210A, the A is the money bill, were approved in the legislature despite last-minute debating triggered by two kill motions that were offered and withdrawn. The motions were parliamentary maneuvers used to permit discussion of the bills at the final legislative stage. The bills, which would equalize pension benefits of female state and county employees by raising them slightly while lowering those for male workers, were passed with relative ease. Why were these men willing to shortchange women when it came to pensions? And the bad thing about it, government workers, the government which is supposed to set the standard, set the example. But discrimination against women has always been the standard. And no white people thought to do this, and the ones who fought against it were white. Let me scramble right along. The vote to pass LB 210 was 28 to 19. 19 white people didn't want to do this, while the appropriations measure accompanying it was given 30 to 19 approval. Senator Jerome Warner of Waverly said 30 votes were necessary for the funding measure because it exceeds the governor's budget. Senator Patricia Moorhead of Beatrice said passage was a significant step. I'm pleased, she said. It's a magnificent advancement for women. Well, why didn't the white people do this before I came? It was their women. I'm the son of enslaved people. We've always been deemed inferior. We were owned and treated like cows, pigs, and chickens. Our women were trafficked. They were raped. Their children sometimes were killed as they were being born. Yet it took a black man to do something that should have been embedded in the idea of fundamental justice. For those who may not be aware of it, when you are a state employee, a certain percentage of your salary is taken out and put in a pension fund so that when you retire, you get this amount of money. And the same percentage that was taken out of the man's salary was taken out of the woman's salary. But when time came to collect, women got a lesser amount. And some people have heard me say this before, but it was unfair, because when a woman went to the store and bought a loaf of bread, the storekeeper didn't say, well, I know you used to work for the state. I know that when you get your pension benefits, they're less than what men get, so I'm going to charge you less for a loaf of bread. Never. And we know that would never happen. But that shows how in the real world, these things can have a damaging effect. And that would be the case as long as that woman lived and drew that pension. She was getting less than what men were getting. So you could say in a way that the money she paid in was going to make it possible for these white men to get more more pension payout when they retired or left for whatever reason. But continuing, debate was sparked when Senator Chris Beitler of Lincoln offered, then withdrew, a kill motion to enable him to speak on the measures. He said extension of the principle embodied by the bill would hurt women rather than help them because it could lead to higher insurance premiums in some cases. Not that it would. This is something that might happen to women, so let's leave it in place, the discrimination. Quote, today, life insurance rates are generally, not always, 15 to 20% cheaper for women than for men, he said. Well, women live longer, so they're going to pay for their insurance policy for a longer time before their family collects on it. He said automobile insurance rates range from 18 to 66% cheaper for women than men now, and those are based on the driving records of people. Everybody knows, almost instinctively, that men are less cautious in driving than women. They have more accidents, and the accidents are more serious. Beitler also said, there is a case related to issues raised by this bill pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, and Nebraska should await direction from the High Court. No, if we have a conscience and believe in morality and fair play, and Nebraska is such a good Christian state, then let us do what is right, what is moral, what is fair. We don't need a Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. to tell us in Nebraska what to do. But it took somebody like me, an outsider, a man generally scorned and hated, to do the right thing. But that makes me think of a guy a long time ago. He was scorned, he was hated, and all he did was good. If he saw somebody blind, he would make that person able to see. If they were deaf, they'd be able to hear. A person had lost a little girl, died to death, and was crying, and he said, "Why are you crying?" And the father and the mother said almost in unison, "Our little girl is dead." And he said, "No, she's not dead, she sleeps." And they said, "You must be a lunatic." And we're beginning to grow crazed, grow furious, when all of a sudden they heard from the little girl. And lo and behold, she was alive. And that person, known as Jesus Christ, is the one who worked this miracle. And you know what happened to him? He was murdered. He was murdered by the state, by the authorities, because pressure was brought to bear by, of all people, the religious people. He was crucified. Now, some people might think that that's the way it was meant to be because that's what happened. That is not the way it ought to have been. And when we say ought, that is talking about principles, morality, and so forth. But speaking of male-female relationships, male domination, female suppression, there was a lady, she was a former slave, named Sojourner Truth. She was very, to use that term they do about black people who can put 10 words together and make sense, she was very articulate, and she was religious. And she was going after Frederick Douglass. And she said, "Frederick, I want you to know that the greatest man who ever lived was Jesus Christ. And that man was produced by God and a woman. A man had nothing to do with it." So there have always been people who tried to use moral arguments to make a point, and I can't say that any of them had been successful in the sense of turning the tide. but we who try to help the poor, the dispossessed, those who are among the least, the last, and the lost, know and understand very well that any progress we make is going to be incremental, measured in millimeters. But nevertheless, we must press on. This article is from 2024, which would be 30 years ago, and it appeared in the Lincoln Journal-Star. No, this one was in, of all places, the Omaha World Herald. And the headline, "Against the Grain Yet Again," meaning I often and regularly moved against the grain. Sub-headline, "Master Tactician Chambers Uses Legislative Rules to be Heard." Not a fist, not a muscle, but the rules, their rules. Let me get into this. Senator Chambers, colleagues say they admire his intelligence and hard work, even as they dread his filibusters and barbed attacks. Nothing that I do is done simply because I can do it. There's always a purpose, and they know what that purpose is, and they know that they can shut me up by just doing justice and being fair to everybody. Here we go. Like a boxer, dancing his opponent around the ring, State Senator Ernie Chambers of Omaha took control of debate on the governor's juvenile crime bill during the past 2 weeks. One man took control for 2 weeks. With a flurry of amendments, the senator from North Omaha jabbed at other senators with humor, logic, and the occasional verbal attack. He promised to wear the legislature down until he won the changes he believed necessary. Quote, "You have to deal with this bill on my terms because you brought this bill on your terms," he said at one point. Senators and lobbyists said the performance was typical of Chambers, right down to the compromises and concessions that eventually led to Thursday's vote to advance the bill. I know that they're hard-headed, and I've got to punch and punch, and I know that they're going to run out of gas, run out of patience, and even the governor will tell him, you know he's not going to back off till he gets his way. So give in as little as possible, but give in because we must move on. Continuing. Senators and lobbyists said the performance was typical of Chambers, right down to the compromises and concessions that eventually led to Thursday's vote to advance the bill. More of the same, only intensified, is expected as the session wears on and the bills Chambers really dislikes make their way to the floor, said Senator Don Wesley of Lincoln. Quote, "This session is tailor-made for Ernie Chambers to have his day and day and day after day," Wesley said. Wesley and other senators said that while Chambers' tactics can serve a useful purpose at times, they were frustrated at the amount of debate time he consumes. I took what was necessary, not only what they were willing to give. Anybody can do that. When the ones I care about are being mistreated, I'm not going to let 48 other people stand in the way of me doing what I can to bring about justice. Did I always win? No. Did Jesus always win? No. Does God always win? Well, in the end, I suppose so. But look at the people now, spitting in God's face. Let me continue. Wesley and other senators said that while Chambers' tactics can serve a useful purpose at times, they were frustrated at the amount of debate time he consumes. However, senators said, the legislature lacks the desire to use its rules to curtail chambers. No, they didn't lack the desire, they lacked the know-how. They tried every way they could, and I always found a way around them. I was like water. Build a dam, and I'll wear it away. Build it out of a substance that is impervious to being worn away, and I'll wear underneath it and go through it, under it, or go around it, or get enough to go over it. They could not stop me. I was the master of the rules. How did that happen? I studied them. I understand logic, but most importantly, I understand people. And the one who has the strongest will is the one who will prevail. And when I was on what they call a tear, for the least, the last, and the lost, anybody who was in my way would get run over, so to speak. Wesley described the juvenile crime debate as spring training for more controversial proposals such as welfare reform and mandatory minimum prison sentences. They know what it is that I'm opposed to. Chambers 56. To be a young, youthful 56 again. When, as Billy Joel said, when I wore a younger man's clothes. Chambers 56 is not the only senator in the Nebraska legislature to employ the tactics of delay and filibuster, but he probably does it the most, and he is best at it. And in the opinion of some senators, he's the most skilled at it. Some observers said that Chambers, now in his 24th year as a senator, has increased his use of such tactics in recent years. You use what works. Senator Eric Will of Omaha, chairman of the legislature's Rule Committee, said, Chambers knows the rules of debate better than any other senator. Whose rules are they? The white people's. Who adopted the rules? The white people. And they adopted rules that they thought would stop me. But woe upon them, they never could do it. He not only knows the rules, said Will, he knows how to use them to his purposes. In the past several years, Chambers has been prominent in filibusters against anti-abortion bills, pro-gambling bills, and reform of the Workers' Compensation Court. He led the 1987 filibuster against LB 775, a major business incentive measure that eventually passed, but with some changes because of what I was able to get. I can never get everything that I want. If I had been able to get everything I wanted, the millennium would have come, because everybody who was hungry would be fed. Everybody who was sick would be made whole. There would be no poor, no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble. And I never got that. And it hasn't happened yet. I lost my place. Last year, a proposal for a half-cent sales tax to finance improvements of Omaha City Auditorium died when Chambers threatened to filibuster it, and other senators said they opposed it. Although they named frequent instances where Chambers slowed and modified a proposal, none of those interviewed could name a measure killed solely by Chambers' efforts. Right, other senators had to vote the way I wanted them to vote. So there were others, and there were some who even joined the discussion and the debate on the side that I adopted, because even the worst of them had things he or she cared about, and at those points would step forward. And when they were doing the work, I didn't say anything. It was unnecessary. I wouldn't pour water on a drowning person. Chambers said that Chambers sees that as no reason to quit trying. My job is to do all I can to obtain the passage of just legislation and all I can to prevent the passage of unwise, unjust legislation, he said. I do a lot of blocking and tackling. This is a one-house legislature, he said. I am the second house. That's what I should say, huh? But I said, I'm the second chambers. And people began to say, these are not the legislative chambers, they are Ernie's chambers. Anyway, lobbyist Michael Kelly of Omaha said, he's very good at playing defense. You love him when he's with you. You're not very happy with him when he's against you. Chambers said he was not trying to filibuster the juvenile crime bill, even though it took 5 days of debate before the bill advanced. He said he favors many aspects of the bill which would reshape Nebraska's juvenile justice system. Among other things, Legislative Bill 988 would restrict ownership of guns by juveniles, create, quote, boot camps for young prisoners, create a separate facility for violent offenders, and establish an Office of Juvenile Services in the Department of Corrections. It's a rare opportunity for us to really do something worthwhile, Chambers said. If we don't deal with another bill, if we properly deal with LB 988, then the session will be a success. Under Nebraska legislature rules, it is difficult to tell when a debate turns into a filibuster, Senator said. Nebraska's rules limit speakers to 3 5-minute terms on any given motion or amendment. Those who offer the amendment are given an extra 10 minutes to open and debate and 5 minutes to close it. So add up all those minutes and I can get quite a bit done on a bill. And then when that amendment goes, I just write another one. Senators extend debate by filing many amendments and debating each one. The amendments must be germane to the bill. Chambers excels at that sort of activity. Sometimes, you know what? I think Ernie gets blamed for doing what he does, said Senator Brad Ashford of Omaha. I think he does the work for a lot of people. He gets up there and dissects a bill. That's hard to do. That takes a lot of reading and a lot of study. In the juvenile crime debate, Chambers attacked amendments supported by the National Rifle Association that he said would give youths easier access to handguns. Chambers said senators working with the NRA had sold their soul to the devil. At another point in the debate, he invoked the name of University of Nebraska-Lincoln mascot Herbie Husker, saying, quote, "A lame-brained hick is an appropriate symbol for a state that would be the first to give children access to handguns." At yet another point, he maneuvered another senator into a sober discussion of why a 7-year-old is old enough to handle a gun while a 6-year-old is not. That's the kind of ridiculous positions I put them in because I can think and they can't or they don't. In the end, the NRA amendments were stripped from the bill when bill sponsors agreed to remove provisions increasing penalties for those younger than 18 found in possession of a handgun, because if you're going to create this situation, don't punish the children. This article is from 19 years ago, 2005. Chambers deserves decades of respect. And like Old Man River, I'm still rolling along. This was in the Daily Nebraskan, the student newspaper, so it's what the young people thought about what I was doing. He's loved and hated. He's praised and criticized. Good or bad, everyone seems to have an opinion about Ernie Chambers. But adore him or abhor him, Chambers should be respected, if for nothing else, for what the 67-year-old state senator from Omaha has accomplished. In less than a week, Chambers will become the longest-serving senator in the history of the Nebraska legislature, passing the record of Jerome Warner, who served more than 34 years before he died in office, April 20th, 1997. So April 21st, 1997, I became the longest serving senator in the history of this state, and that record will never be broken thanks to term limits. I served a total of, I shouldn't tell you this, and I won't, but it's 4 years short of 50 years, a half a century. It's quite a feat, one that will never again be accomplished, ironically, because of a constitutional amendment that was passed to knock him out of the legislature. That was term limits. In 2009, Chambers will be forced out of office because of term limits. When that happens, Chambers will have served 38 years. But if there's anybody who's smart enough to find a way around that law, it's Chambers. First elected in 1970, Chambers has been re-elected 9 times. He's seen 8 governors come and go. He's seen thousands of bills introduced in the legislature. Chambers will say the record means nothing to him, but Chambers means so much to so many others. In this sense, he's an example of what all senators should be like, not for his filibustering tactics, but for what and who he represents. A self-proclaimed defender of the downtrodden, Chambers couldn't do a better job representing his constituents and others who need to be represented the most. Chambers fights what he believes is bad legislation and works for good ideas. At times, he goes to the extremes to do that. That is why he is the most well-known senator in the state. He's masterful at filibustering and stopping legislation from passing. If you've ever turned the TV to channel 17 during the day, no doubt you've caught Chambers in the middle of one of his long-winded arguments. He quotes philosophers, poets, and the Bible. He talks about injustices. Sometimes his ramblings can seem quite humorous. He's called himself King Cobra before. Quote, "The King Cobra doesn't waste venom on dead things," he once said. That was a bill that was being discussed, and people asked why I didn't have anything to say on it. Well, that's what when I said the King Cobra wastes no dead venom, I said on dead or fleeing things. The bill was on its way out anyway. Earlier this year, Chambers mocked a proposal that would enshrine in the Nebraska Constitution the right to hunt, fish, and trap in the state by his introducing a number of amendments that would also protect the right to hunt for such things as Bigfoot, Noah's Ark, and Amelia Earhart's airplane. During the debate, Chambers proposed to protect running, jumping, and sweating, the hunting of who let the dogs out, the sweetest apple in the orchard, the man in the moon, and liberal Martians. This state, this is a quote from me, "This state is not going to ban fishing, hunting, and trapping," Chambers said at one time. "And if you think so, you need to go get some medication because you have some chemical imbalance in your brain because it's not functioning." It may seem pointless for him to spend the legislature's time with such comments, but he's doing it for a reason, and he's been doing it for close to 35 years. Therefore, he deserves decades of respect. And my time is flying. I'm going to try to get through this before my time runs out. Another side of Chambers, a romantic. This is from 2010. Former Senator Ernie Chambers returned to the Capitol last weekend. Wearing his traditional blue jeans and dark T-shirt, he stood in the rotunda to deliver a message. You could say it was a message from the heart if he had a heart. He has professed for years on the floor of the legislature that he doesn't. At the very least, he touched hearts with the words he spoke to Stacy Trout and Andy Conroy as he presided at their July 3rd wedding. Quote, "This is between me and the two of you," he told them. "Others may eavesdrop if they choose." Stacy and Andy met at the Capitol when she worked for Omaha Senator Brad Ashford and when he was hired too for a time. It was fitting, she said, to ask the man who sat next to her for so many Judiciary Committee meetings. She was committee counsel, he the long-standing member, to marry them. I couldn't think of anyone better, more appropriate, the bride said. He was part of our experience in this place and this time in our lives. Chambers presided at the courtyard wedding of another Capitol staffer last summer, and earlier that year, he participated in a wedding of a New York couple who traveled to Nebraska to be married by me. The agnostic senator, who frequently brought up biblical history and theology in legislative debate, became a credentialed minister in January 2009 through the non-denominational Universal Ministry. In Nebraska, any ordained minister, judge, or clerk magistrate can officiate at a wedding and does not have to register with the state. By the way, I performed the first and only gay marriage in the rotunda of the legislature between two legislative employees. I did that. And I said, in that room, pointing to the rotunda, are some of the most hateful people in the world, and they would do all they could to stop what's happening now, but they can't stop it because I'm the one involved. Chambers said when young people invite him into what is the most important moment in their lives, it is meaningful. He contributed, quote, sincere and very personal advice, unquote. Stacy said, it was very special. Despite love's inevitable ups and downs, he said, it must never be allowed to deteriorate into a fickle thing that parodies true love, nor into a quid pro quo or a barter situation. In exchange for this, I'll give you that. Perfect love casts out not only fear, but jealousy, doubt, and distrust. Aim for that level of perfection, he told them. No matter how elusive it may seem, it is worth the effort. It is what the daily effort and attention are about. Let me turn a corner here, he then said. Quote, there must be that magical and enduring combination of heart and mind, so that when the heart, that organ of romance, whimsy, impracticality, and emotion, falls into one of its unpredictable moods and goes off on vacation, AWOL, the mind comes into play and asserts its wisdom, practicality, and stabilizing influence. It saves the day by holding the fort until the heart regains its balance and love flows again. Be ever lovers, he advised, but never cease being friends. And then he pronounced them friends and spouses, invoking the Vulcan admonition to live long and prosper. Success, Chambers told the couple during the ceremony, is premised upon expectations. I expect this marriage to be as strong and last as long as the Roman Empire, he told them. But he cautioned that the relationship must be consciously and deliberately worked on each day. As much effort must be put into nurturing it as is exerted by elite athletes, top-flight lawyers, and consummate musicians in honing their skills and keeping them sharp, he said. Being a lifetime commitment, it cannot be permitted to drift aimlessly, unattended to. And outsiders or meddlers should not be allowed to interfere. You are marrying each other, he said, not each other's families or friends. Referring to himself, Chambers said, a hard life makes a hard man. Nonetheless, let me try to speak of love. The course of true love never runs smooth. Just as Shakespeare said, even under the best of circumstances, he said, it has its ups and downs because humans are only human. True love will not run in a straight line, he told the couple. Nature abhors a straight line. In music, it is a boring monotone. On a heart monitor, it means the show is over. Now, I don't know how much time I have left, but I know it's close to running out, so I'm going to have to start winding down. Maybe I can get a little of this done. The black Nebraska lawmaker who may have delivered the presidency to Joe Biden. Biden has Ernie Chambers to thank for getting one electoral vote out of the Cornhusker state. The nation has a lot to thank Ernie Chambers for, in fact. This was from a national magazine called The American Prospect, and this was in 2020. As unlikely as it may seem, Nebraska may have clinched Joe Biden's presidential victory and steered the country away from electoral college gridlock. Nebraska, like Maine, has a unique electoral system where the voters are split up. The votes are split up to congressional districts. Historically, Nebraska is a deep red state with reliable blue enclaves in Omaha and Lincoln, the state's two urban centers. But as of Wednesday morning, Biden had won Nebraska's 2nd congressional district by more than 6 percentage points. If Biden falls short in the states where he's trailing right now, but holds on to Nevada and Arizona, he will have 270 electoral votes in his corner, the bare minimum required to win the presidency. That would mean the single electoral vote in Nebraska would provide the margin of victory, avoiding a 269-269 tie that would throw the election to the House of Representatives, where, because of the peculiar rules for resolving such ties, Trump would likely be chosen president, even though the House is in the hands of Democrats. More from this writer. It's only the second time Nebraska's electoral districts have not gone fully to the statewide popular vote winner. In 2008, Barack Obama poached the 2nd congressional district, which encompasses Omaha, surrounding suburbs, and a few farms. He got that by 3,325 votes, a margin of just 1.2%. I'm looking for a signal. How much time? Well, I'll go on. In 2016, Donald Trump carried the state by 25 points, but only ousted Clinton in the district by 2%. Even this year, while Biden took Nebraska comfortably, the same voters advanced Representative Don Bacon, the Republican incumbent, over progressive Kara Eastman. Anyway, it went on to show how, because of the way I know the rules, the way I can stop them from doing damage, I preserve that one electoral vote that can come out of Omaha. And nationally, there was a lot of credit given to me, and it was, let me show you. Though there was a confluence of forces that led to Biden's victory in the district, it would be a mistake to overlook one of his homegrown heroes, Ernie Chambers, a giant in Nebraska politics. Chambers is Nebraska's longest-serving state senator, and thus just this year completed what could be his final term in office after 46 years of service. Immediately recognizable by his casual dress of short-sleeved sweatshirts and blue jeans, Chambers is so popular in his district that he didn't even have to campaign or still re-elected 11 times. A self-proclaimed defender of the downtrodden, Chambers got his political start as a civil rights leader in the 1960s, and throughout his remarkable legislative career, fostered progressive politics in a deep red state and fought for the integrity of equal and fair representation. That includes the system for distributing electoral votes, which Chambers went to extraordinary lengths to maintain. Nebraska established its policy in 1991, and they came close in 2016 to doing away with it when Senator Bo McCoy introduced a bill to restore a winner-take-all system. McCoy was an outright racist, Chambers told me that's the writer, in a phone conversation. He wanted to ensure that wouldn't happen. The he was referring to me. Anyway, I got it done, and the system still works where there is one electoral vote that can come from Douglas County or the Omaha area. Let me see if I can find something. A gifted orator, some have likened to a firebrand preacher, Chambers used his time in extended debates to educate his mostly white colleagues. And I went to great lengths and employed what some people call drastic measures to get that done. And next week, I have something that I will announce about what I intend to do in the upcoming election, but I don't have enough time to go into it now. When I'm in a game, I play by the rules. And the rules of this game that I'm participating in here says that the clock is the master. And when the clock reaches a certain point, all things must come to an end. In the same way that each and every one of us, all of you who hear me now, at some point will breathe out and never take another breath in. And when that happens, there is an apparition known as the Grim Reaper who will harvest you and be very happy about it. And he has done his work more consistently than anybody else. Although Methuselah lived longer than anybody else, 969 years, he was harvested by the Grim Reaper in the same way that an infant who draws one breath and dies is harvested. And the longest life of a human being is less than the pop of fingers when you weigh it against the age of the earth and the universe itself. So, since all things come to an end, I'll now say what the canary said when he found out that the cage door was unlocked. The door was unlocked on the cage. I'm out of here.
You've been watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to leave suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This is an EWC Communications production.